Alright guys, so in this video, I'm going to be looking at the worst college football stadiums in every single major conference in 2023. Now this can get a little complicated because there are a few stadiums on this list that are or are planning to go through renovations. We're going to get to that when we get to those, but it's just going to be one stadium from every Power 5 conference, and then I'm going to do a few Group of Fives as well. But we're going to kick it off with the Big Ten. And of course, this one very easy. It is Ryan Field for Northwestern, by far the smallest stadium in the Big Ten. They have already planned on replacing it in 2026 with a very nice new stadium. But yeah, very little analysis is needed for this one. There is no second deck of seats for a Big Ten team. That is pretty much unexcusable, and the lower bowl is just completely outdated when you look at the one side. So this one very easily is the worst stadium in the Big Ten. It is what it is. You know, the end zones, one of them has seats. The other end zone looks like has a little area that they renovated probably a while ago. Either way, this is getting replaced. We all know it's the worst in the Big Ten. It is Ryan Field. Their new stadium, again, is going to open in 2026. I will say one of the more interesting things about Ryan Field is those two little buildings on each side of the stands. That is something that is interesting and kind of an intriguing feature. Makes it feel a bit more old. Those are not press boxes. You can see the press box in the center there. So that, I guess, makes it kind of a unique little design. Moving to the SEC, it's going to be Vanderbilt Stadium. So another one that's very obvious. Now, Vanderbilt Stadium is looking at closing off its end zone. There currently, I believe, is construction going on right now in the end zone to close it off. And there are a few renderings, and it does look pretty good. But even with the renovation, when you look at the other stadiums within the SEC, it's just by far the smallest. Obviously, we know Vanderbilt, it's very hard to get in compared to other SEC schools when it comes to the academics. They've been a horrible team when it comes to college football in the SEC, and their stadium, there's no second deck to it. So it's just hard for me to rank anything worse than this. It's very bland. It kind of reminds me of an ACC stadium, but Vanderbilt Stadium by far, I would say, the worst stadium in the SEC. With the renovation, again, it does get better and it's going to bump it up a little bit, but I would still say just because there's nothing to it in comparison to all the other SEC stadiums, it is going to be the worst. Next, we are going to the ACC, and it is Wallace Wade Stadium, home of the Duke Blue Devils. So, very, very close decision between this and Virginia. I decided to not go with Virginia because I do like their arches. They're kind of a little unique feature, and I am going with Duke. Just very bland overall. It does look like they added in some decent suites relatively recently. But really, there's just nothing to it. There is no second tier of seating. And, you know, Duke being a complete basketball school, they did produce Daniel Jones, though. We have to give them credit to that. This stadium, it did get newer blue seats, so we have to give them credit for it. But overall, there's nothing to it. At least they did take out the track. That's basically the bare minimum for any Power 5. So for the ACC, there's a few different ones to choose from. I actually looked up Boston College's stadium, and I was very impressed with Boston College Stadium. For being a smaller stadium, it's really good. But yeah, if Duke wants to improve it, what I would suggest is doing what Boston College, look at Boston College, see their second tier of seating. All you need is 10 or 11 rows, but you need a second deck. Otherwise, the stadium is just going to look so, it looks like a Group of 5 stadium. And I know they don't have good attendance. I get it. But when it comes to the football stadium, it is really lacking just overall, so I've got to go with it there. Next, we're going to the Big 12, and it is the Kansas David Booth Memorial Stadium. This is one that is getting a renovation. Now, Kansas, they've been a laughingstock for a while. They are getting better. They took some steps forward last year. I believe, what did they start, 4-0, maybe 5-0? But again, there's just nothing to this stadium. It looks completely outdated. It's very, very small. And its one end zone isn't even completed, but you can see there are some renderings on it possibly getting done. They're investing $300 million in a big time renovation. Recently they had the track removed, so that's how kind of dated this thing was. At least they did that. And they should be expanding seating, so at least it will improve, but just looking at its current state, it is not good. One of the end zones is not closed. I think at this point, in 2023, if you're a Power 5 team, that is simply unacceptable, and I know Kansas has been bad and they're investing money, and this is kind of like a Duke situation where it's very clear this is a basketball school. Any type of stadium or arena upgrade is going to be used on basketball, and the money's going to go to basketball. We get that. But it does seem like Kansas is making a concerted effort to invest into their football program. But right now, the Memorial Stadium, as it sits, I would say it's the worst in the Big 12. Even with the new teams coming into the Big 12, Cincinnati has a very nice stadium. BYU Stadium has amazing views. UCF, I know the bounce house, they're trying to improve it, but overall, I would say this is still the worst one in the Big 12, even with the new teams joining. The next one is the Pac-12, and it's going to be Martin Stadium, home of Washington State. It was between this one and Cal, and I ended up going with this one because kind of like the California vibe, they've got that hill, it's a little more unique. This one just seems very dreary, in Washington State, and it really doesn't capitalize based off of its location on any of the views. It seems like it's completely blocked out by the 3 suite levels and by the one closed end zone with some building type. I mean, I'll give them credit, I guess, with that building overlooking and all those windows. That's a unique perspective to watch a game, but it just adds zero character. That it just does not fit. I'm sorry, like a building right up against the back end zone. I don't like that at all. I would much rather see some type of seating or some type of upscale bar, standing room, social area over there. To me, having a building right up against as a backdrop is just really bad, and it was a really turnoff for me. So Martin Stadium, Washington State, they've had some decent years, they've had some bad years, they're kind of irrelevant at this point. Oregon State did recently get a new stadium, otherwise they probably would have been on my list in 2023 for the worst stadium in the Pac-12, but it does have to be Washington State. I mean, there are some nice views if you look the other way, but there's just nothing to it. It's just a lower bowl. I understand they don't draw very well, but when I'm judging stadiums, I have to factor that into it. And for me, that's the main reason, just the overall view, the overall look of it, the fact that it's there's just nothing to it. So for me, it's the worst stadium in the Pac-12. And then going to some group of 5 conferences, it is the MAC. We're going to go with UB Stadium, the home of Buffalo. And they're still rocking the track at Buffalo, so it's instantly going to go on my list. It's kind of a nice little design, very small upper deck, almost bite-size upper deck with about 7 rows. But yeah, I mean, if you're going to rock the track, you got to go on the list. I'm sorry, there's just no other way to look at it. There's a lot of other MAC stadiums that aren't good. I'm sure people can guess, they can understand, with the MAC conference not being very good, they don't get high attendance, there's not a lot of talent that rolls through there. They're going to have some pretty bad stadiums. But yeah, again, you're going to have the track. There's nothing to it. It's going to be on my list for the worst stadium in the MAC. They have, pitched some various renovation proposals. Obviously the number one thing, the number one idea is to remove the track and replace it maybe with a sideline patio, maybe lower the field as well as part of a renovation. So there's some ideas out there, but I don't think anything is close to being implemented. They certainly need to do something, though. And then when it comes to the AAC, the team I went with originally was Tulsa. Just looking at their stadium, very dreary, nothing special about it at all. I guess you could say the one end zone. I mean, again, they're going with a building design. I just think that looks so ugly. And, they've got the roof right there. I just hate that look overall. And there's just nothing to Tulsa Stadium. But also, the other thing is Rice is now a newcomer to the AAC, the American Conference, because they lost 4 teams, and Rice's stadium is just entirely too big. The upper deck is way too large for how many people they get, and they virtually never sell it out, so it ends up being a total eyesore. They've actually, I don't know if those tarps were for the pandemic, but I'm going to assume they weren't, and they just tarped off areas because they have such large seating and nowhere to put anyone. So theirs is kind of the opposite. I've had stadiums on this list for being too small. Seems like Rice is a little bit too large, and unless they have some kind of massive turnaround within their college football program, it's not looking good. I mean, that's just an unfortunate situation with how big the upper deck is, not filling it. It's a terrible look, and it doesn't help that, this thing is a gray eyesore. The exterior of it looks like skull and bones. It is what it is. There's just not a lot of money invested into it. They did recently, or I don't know if it was recent, but I did see an article that they renovated the one end zone, and I don't think it looks very good. It looks like a fitness center, if I'm being completely honest. I don't know what they did to it. I'm guessing it's some type of restaurant that you can watch games, and in front of it, it looks like a little grassy area. That's certainly a thing to do to close off your stadium. That's not what I would pick. If I was an architect with the modern design, you're talking about a team like Kansas. You're talking about a team like Rice. You're talking about some of these lower tier teams, Washington State, for example. 100%. If I am tasked with closing off a stadium, an end zone of a stadium, I am building a futuristic, maybe like multi-level bar standing room area that has a few rows of seats in front of it that can act as a balcony. That's what I would be doing. I'm not building this weird athletic center looking thing. It looks like a 24-hour fitness center, folks. What are we doing here with these things? They need to design these things better, especially when it comes to closing off the end zones. I think Vanderbilt's looks really good. I would, look at their design if you want to. And how about, is it Texas Tech? I'm going to throw the picture up of the rendering. It might be Texas Tech. They've got an amazing design. It is really nice, and I was surprised to see them dole out that money for the all red brick design. I love that red brick. It's very, very nice. It is a clean look. That is a thing that it's my preference when it comes to architecture. So, that's what I would say when it comes to closing off the stadiums. I've seen a few that you're going to put a giant building that looks like a library in front of it, or it looks like some type of factory. I don't understand the idea. And then you've got roofing right there. It just looks really, really ugly to me. So, I don't know, guys. Those are the worst stadiums in some of the bigger conferences. Maybe I'll do another part to this video and talk about some of the smaller conferences, although I did do the MAC and the AAC. Either way, that's going to do it for this video. Make sure you're following me on Twitter. Link to that's always in the description. I'm, of course, the Depressed Ginger. Thank you for watching.